Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champs? Welcome back to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. My name's Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me, as always. Poppin' Ricardo.
What's poppin'?
We got an interesting show to get you today. I really want to stay committed to this short 25-30 minute window because we have been really kicking it on these hour shows, and I love talking about football for an hour. But I left the area where I was recording, and my wife was like, "Why does it take so long?" And I don't make decisions for the fantasy podcast based on my wife, but I do think the show should be shorter. So we're going to try to keep it condensed because we don't want to keep you here for an hour and a half talking about Sam Howell's fantasy value. So we're going to talk about the top 5 rookie quarterbacks for fantasy football in 2022. Before we do that, check out our website, fantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all the friggin' platforms. Type our name in, you'll find us. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcast platforms, please leave a review and share this pod with your friends. And then if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for noties, and like and comment down below any questions you have about each one of these rookies, and we'll give you what our opinions are. I do want to preface that these top 5 rookies, for me and Rick, for Rick and I, are both... See, I lost my train of thought. Oh, I had a really big preface that we needed to get into, but
fantasy.
They're related to fantasy
purposes?
Only, not in real life. Not in real
Yes.
life. Thank you for reminding me.
My real life rankings are slightly different than my fantasy ones.
Okay.
Actually,
give me your real life right now.
Okay, I still have Willis 1.
Okay. Well,
I
you
go
just
Kenny
broke
Pickett.
the news to everyone, but thanks.
Kenny Pickett 2.
Okay.
I actually still have Sam Howell 3, Matt Carroll 4, Ritter 5.
Okay. I don't know how I would rank mine. Willis would definitely be 1. Howell probably be 2. Pickett 3, Ritter 4, Carroll 5.
So you have Howell lower in fantasy than you do in real life, even though he's
Yes. Yeah.
kind of a rushing quarterback?
Yeah, I think he has a higher chance at success.
He had 800 rushing yards this
But
past year.
yeah, I know. You're making me. All right, I'm gonna change my ranking.
But the year before that, he only had 100. So it was kind of like, was he rushing because he can't rush?
Don't do that. We'll
what?
talk about Sam Howell when we get there. I was gonna move him, and then Rick said that, and I'm like, okay, maybe I shouldn't move him. Screwing me up. Talked about this last show, bro.
I know what you're talking about.
Anyway, so let's talk about the top 5 rookies. What say you, Rick?
Yeah, let's do it.
So as he kindly broke the news to you before we got into the segment, Malik Willis is the number 1 quarterback on both our rankings. And we both, by the way, have the same 5 quarterbacks. I think it's pretty... I don't want to base it off last year because last year was kind of like interesting. There was 5 top quarterbacks. This year, I feel like... why am I yawning? I feel like there's 5 quarterbacks this year that could be starting.
Oh, you don't want Carson Strong?
Carson Strong's arm is so powerful.
It goes with the name.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like he could be something, but I feel like after like Pickett, Willis, and Howell in my real life rankings, it's mostly like projects or guys like Kellen Mond and Davis Mills from last year.
Carson Strong just feels like a Jacob Eason.
100%. Everyone gets sweaty about his throw power, and then. But anyway, so we both have Malik Willis as our number 1 quarterback on the board, and all you gotta know about this player is if you go, and I'm not a pro day guy where you watch the pro day and get all sweaty Betty over a player, but go watch his pro day, and that's all you really need to know. There is a lot of concerns around Malik Willis, but Rick, I want to get your thoughts on A, why you have him number one, and B, what you think of the player.
Yeah, I mean, I've been talking about Malik Willis to you. I think I first brought him up to you in like August.
Yep.
Because I have connections to people at Liberty, so I've known people.
Can you get him on the podcast?
No, I don't think I could do that. But I've been watching him for a while, so I like the prospect a lot. I liked him before it was cool. You know, it was just like Zach Wilson. Liked him before he was cool. And then all of a sudden, people in the last few months have really jumped Malik Willis into this conversation of being. He went from a late first round pick to a mid first round pick, and now people are talking about him being potentially a top 10, top 5 pick. Which I think at that point you're getting a little strong, because I love Malik Willis. I do. I love him off the field. I think he's like the perfect type of player that you would want as your quarterback.
Yeah.
He's going to be a great locker room guy. There's zero complaints about him off the field. And then on the field, he's got a lot of talent. He's got a huge arm. He's very elusive, very quick. His player comp on Player Profiler is Justin Fields. I think Fields has a little bit more polished quarterback ability than Malik Willis. But I do see the comparison. He was very good in college, but he wasn't great. Anytime he played against really tough competition too, he did struggle a little bit. He's a project guy, and I really hope he's not set up for failure. If he gets picked in the top 5 and starts week 1, I think he's going to be set up for failure. I would like to see him sit like Trey Lance. Doesn't even have to be for a full year, maybe like half a season, and let him develop a little bit. But he's got all the traits, and for fantasy purposes, he's going to be fantastic because he's going to run. So he's got a very high floor for fantasy. He had over 800 rushing yards this past year, 900 the year before in just 10 games. So he's going to have an extremely high floor, just like Jalen Hurts. And he's going to be very fantasy relevant for years to come.
I agree. With most of what you said.
Most.
I was going to say, what? Yeah, I make it sound like there's something I disagree on, but I don't. Who would you? Because this guy reminds me a lot of somebody that you mentioned, Trey Lance.
Yes.
Not in terms of like the play style, because I think I mean maybe.
I think Lance is actually less elusive.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
He's bigger. So like
Willis is.
You know how Josh Allen will truck a guy? Trey Lance could truck a guy. I don't know Willis, at the NFL level, at least.
So I don't mean it in that context. I mean it in the context of, he's a project and it's going to take a little bit of time, but he has a lot of raw physical tools.
Yes.
That can translate to the pro game, and if he's teachable enough, he can become which I've heard. That his footwork had improved from a ton from 2020 to 2021, which shows that he can take coaching.
That's why I said about off the field, and kind of why I brought that up too. Yeah, because it's not just because he's a good locker room guy, blah blah blah. But players like that will typically take coaching, which is very important for a prospect that is considered raw.
Right. Would you take, if you had to choose one, and they were both in the same draft, and you needed a quarterback for your football team, would you take Malik Willis or Trey Lance?
It's very close. I just think as a prospect, I would take Trey Lance. But it's very close though.
To be honest with you,
to be completely honest with you, if I was an actual GM, let's play pretend here. I was an actual GM. I would probably let personal bias get in the way and take Malik Willis. I don't know.
You would take Malik Willis.
I would think it would I'd very much think about it at least. But I just think like Lance, to me, they both have monster arms. Don't get me wrong, and this is picking at straws, but I think Lance has a little bit stronger of an arm. He's bigger. Mm-hmm. Both of them have struggled with reading defenses, I think, which will be a problem. I think, and they both kind of didn't play against great competition.
Yeah. Right.
So that's also true. So I don't know. It's tough. Right. But Lance is going to be in a better landing spot, I think. I don't see where Willis goes.
If Malik Willis gets taken by like the Pittsburgh Steelers or something like that,
so then
I could see could see him being in a similar to or better situation than maybe not better, but
it'll at least be on the same level.
Yeah, and so
yes,
it's
like Detroit, though?
I really like Malik Willis as a person and as a player, and I think you can like both Trey Lance and Malik Willis. For me, it's very, very close. Both of them have the same problems, though, and that's kind of like he. I will say smaller school, less competition. Like Malik Willis at least faced some Power 5 defenses. I don't think Trey Lance played any. So, obviously that didn't look good for Malik Willis when he did. He crapped his pants against good defenses and top schools in the country. But, they're kind of in the same boat. So that's why I compare them a little bit. But the reason why I ask that is because, I feel
like Willis is also a full year older than Trey Lance. And he's already been in the league.
That would factor into the decision too. But anyway, I should probably give my analysis on Malik Willis. So he has the physical tools. He's an athlete, so he jumps into an offense and he's gonna try to find a way for his team to win offensively, whether it's with his feet or through the air. He is 100% very unpolished when it comes to the passing aspect of his game. Where you look at Justin Fields, he's a good comp for him rushing wise, but passing wise, Fields I feel like is a leap above him. And Willis has a lot to work with on that. I've noticed when watching him, it's like he has trouble not necessarily reading a defense, but he gets caught staring at his target. So you see guys in the pro game right now, for example, Joe Burrow, and even younger guys like Mac Jones and Trevor Lawrence could do this year. Is they'll look off safeties using their eyes and their shoulders to try to push them in a certain direction so they can get separation on a different guy down the field on the opposite side. And Willis has trouble doing that. He kind of just stares at the receiver that he's supposed to throw to, which isn't good when you're transitioning to the NFL game. So that's kind of a big concern. His bad performances against good defenses is a concern, and he was inconsistent on tape, but has made some massive strides. So I think he has a very high ceiling. Like Rick said, he's a project quarterback, but the reason why I have him number one is if he works, like Lamar came in, couldn't pass. Literally, I'm looking at the profile right now on PFF, right? One of the pluses, adds massive value as a runner. Draftable running back if he switched. 146 broken tackles. They literally said the same thing about Lamar. Lamar can't pass. Subsequently, in a press conference at the Combine, they asked him, I think it was 15 times in a row, Lamar, you're going to switch to running back. Lamar, you're going to switch to wide receiver. Lamar, you're going to play another position. Lamar, you're not going to play quarterback. Teams said they would take you at this position. Are you going to do it? And he was like, I'm a quarterback. I'm not playing those positions. And I think that's what they kind of look at Malik Willis as, is maybe he could be another guy. But I think as a prospect, Malik Willis is a little bit, I don't know if you disagree on this, but a little bit better than Lamar was as a passer coming out.
He's got a stronger arm.
He's got a stronger arm. So, but with all that being said, Malik Willis has, I think, special talents as a rusher. And if he does get an opportunity to start for a team and he becomes a success, his fantasy value is going to be wrapped up in his rushing ability. With that being said, because he's the best rusher in the class, because he shows signs of improvement, and because he's just a freak athlete and he has the tools, I would say he has to be number one on my board for fantasy football. There's no other way about it.
Agreed.
He struggles with pocket presence, he struggles with accuracy, and he struggles with decision making. Are those things that are coached into a player? Possibly. You saw Josh Allen go from horrible inaccuracy to being a very accurate quarterback and being very good. He also had problems with pocket presence as well. So it's like, if you can improve those areas, that's great. But is it coachable to get rid of this decision-making problem and the pocket presence problem? And that's the real question.
Yeah, I think it is coachable, but it's not the easiest thing to get out of the guy. It's not like it just happens.
Right.
So he's going to have to put in the work, but he's definitely our fantasy quarterback one.
Yeah. Let's move to the next guy, which is, I'm trying to find my sheet. Let's talk about, you want to talk about Pickett or Howell next?
We'll talk about Pickett, I think, because he's more the consensus number 2.
Okay. So let's talk about Kenny Pickett. I have him number 2. Rick has him number 3. And Kenny Pickett is
number 2 in real life.
You said number 2 in real life?
Yes.
So Kenny Pickett on tape is really interesting. This is the guy that was Twitter famous for 5 minutes because he fake slid on a player. Very interesting player. Now, we just talked about Malik Willis, where he has this elite arm strength, right? And we talked about how, he has an elite arm strength and he's a good runner, and he does those two things really, really well, right? But then he struggles with some other aspects of his game. Kenny Pickett, I would say, is maybe one of the best all-around quarterbacks in this class, if you had to choose one. Like last year, who would you say the best all-around quarterback was? Probably Trevor Lawrence. Yeah. And so this is probably the best all-around quarterback.
Which is not saying much.
I know. He doesn't do anything at an elite level. But he does everything really good. He has decent arm strength, good arm strength. He has good accuracy. He's good in the pocket. He's good mobility. He's good at decision making.
Yeah. Yep.
He has good process. He has a good feel for the pocket. Like he's good at most things. And there's obviously some things he's got to improve upon. But when I watched him on tape, he just seemed like, he was the best all-around guy. Like if you were looking for multiple traits in one player, that's Kenny Pickett. But
baby hands though.
Yeah, baby hands though. I'm concerned about his upside.
Yes.
In the NFL, I'm concerned that he doesn't have this, everyone last year talked about Mac Jones and his ceiling. Like, what is this kid's ceiling? Is he just going to be good at doing everything, but not great at doing anything? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, and that, like, if he does end up like that, then I'm a little bit more concerned. But we've seen guys like this. You know who Kenny Pickett reminds me of?
Who?
Justin Herbert.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Not in terms of like a comparison, like this is what he's going to become.
In terms of like how he's viewed.
Yes. And when I watched him on tape, and I remember 2 years ago when I watched Justin Herbert on tape, I was concerned about Justin Herbert. Do you remember we had this conversation about Herbert being Mitch Trubisky?
Yeah.
He obviously did not become that. He's fantastic. But that's,
to be fair,
we'll say this
Mitch...
guy reminds me of a Mitch Trubisky in a way, where he could be somebody that's really good and has some tools where he can do good things with this. But there also could be a big downside to him where he could end up like Sam Darnold and suck. You know what I mean? Like, right. So it's like, or Mitch Trubisky and suck. So, but if we talk about that being his kind of, the all-around quarterback that can play, because that's kind of what Justin Herbert is. He can do everything. Like
except Herbert is like, has a rocket. He's
that's
probably
fair.
top 5 biggest arms in the league.
Yeah, that's totally.
And he's also like 6'6", 2 something. He's huge and he's fat.
Yes. Like I said, not comparing him build wise and like he can do something special.
I understand what you're saying.
I'm just saying like I can see him as an all-around quarterback, fantasy-wise, doing similar things to Justin Herbert. And that I don't compare his like arm strength or different stuff like that, like physical like stuff that he can do. Like he's good at everything, not great at stuff like I said. But I see him as a quarterback where Herbert can do it with his arm, he can do it with his feet, and basically create fantasy points in many different ways. And so if Pickett becomes a success in the NFL, it'll be the ability
it's a lower level comp that Player Profile has for Kenny Pickett.
Yeah.
Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, it's not bad. That's not a bad comp.
It's kind of gross, but
it's close, but it's not a bad comp. That's a good comp.
Honestly, if he turns out to be Ryan Tannehill, I think an NFL team would take that.
Yeah. So that's kind of my situation. I think he could definitely improve in some areas. Processing speed was one of those things. He holds the ball way too long. I think I read that he is the second highest time to throw in the country, which is not good. That reminds me. Remember when I was talking about Fields last year? How long he held the ball. And he has some mechanics problems. He also is he a fifth-year senior? Is that correct?
So I was going to bring this up talking about Kenny Pickett. He's a fifth-year senior, and his first 4 years he sucked.
First 4 years,
this is not, and I'm not just saying, like, his previous best year was probably his fourth year.
Yeah,
as a 22-year-old, 13 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 2,400 yards, 61% completion percentage.
Hey, sometimes it takes a little while.
He only had one good year in college, and that was his last year.
Yeah,
and he was amazing. He was a Heisman finalist, 4,300 yards, 67% completion percentage.
Yeah.
42 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. That's a really, really good season. He's already 20. He's going to be 24 when the season starts. 24 years old as a rookie. He, last year we did have that conversation about Mac Jones and the ceiling and all that stuff. I think Kenny Pickett's kind of in the same boat. Like, you're going to get a little bit, obviously, better out of him in the NFL. I mean, he's a rookie still, and 24 is still young enough.
I think he's a better fantasy prospect than Mac Jones, but
I do too, but it's not by a lot. But I do think he's, just because I think he's a little bit better of a rusher than Mac Jones was, or is, I should say. You mean
a little bit better than zero?
Mac Jones is like a 2, on a scale of 10. Brady's a 0.
What happened to his QB slide fake?
No, that's what I'm saying. He has a little bit of it. He ran a 4.7.
Oh, wow. That's worse than Mac Jones.
What did Mac Jones?
Oh, no, Mac Jones ran a 4.8.
No, Mac Jones ran a 4.88. Yeah.
Never mind. So forgive me. He's a little fast.
Yeah, so it's a little faster. He's definitely more elusive. I think we know that.
It's hard for Mac to carry that stomach.
Yeah. Mac, he had a higher burst score too than Mac.
Yeah.
So he is more athletic than Mac Jones. But yeah, what I will say though, and another comparison with Mac Jones, what was the one positive thing that I think a lot of people did agree with on Mac Jones last year?
He's the most NFL ready.
Correct. He is the most NFL ready.
I was about to screw that up and say something else. I was trying to see where you were guiding the conversation.
Well, you got it. I think Kenny Pickett is the most NFL ready of this group of quarterbacks. I think he's really the only guy that, and I think Daniel Jeremiah has said this, where you can plug him in week 1 and he might not be great, but I think you would feel better about him than Malik Willis or some of the other guys that we're going to talk about. Yeah. So those are the good things about Kenny Pickett, but I don't think he's ever going to be like a top 10 fantasy quarterback, or even. I mean, it would have to be a lot of things to go right for him, I feel like, to be that. Yeah, but he's going to be solid. He's going to be solid.
He's a little bit, like you said, like you said. He's more athletic than Mac Jones is, and I think if he needs to,
but he's not like.
If he needs to, he will, and I don't necessarily think that he needed to rush all that much this year, and so that does concern people. But if you see in a season that he's played in the past at Pittsburgh for the first 4 years of his friggin' career, right? He had 220 rushing yards, 110, 145 this year. He had 223. With 42 touchdowns. I think for me, it's like if he needs to, he can rush. And it just depends on the situation. Like, he's not going to be a massive rushing quarterback, but the Tannehill comparison is a very good one. And Tannehill has been a QB1 before. So if Kenny Pickett ends up becoming Tannehill or better, then I think he can do that. And I think when you look at a guy like, I wish I could see I'm going to look up Justin Herbert's college numbers, but it's very similar. This is the reason why I bring Herbert up, because he's an all-around quarterback. He didn't come out being like, okay, this guy's going to rush for 400-something yards, you know what I mean, or 500 yards.
Herbert ran a 4.68, so he's 4.6.
But he had at Oregon, every year at Oregon, 161 rushing yards, 183, 166, 50. So he didn't rush at all in college either, but that didn't mean he couldn't do it. You know what I mean? So
Herbert's a little bit more athletic than.
Yeah, I agree. So I have Kenny Pickett too, because I think he could become, he's probably going to end up, depending on landing spot, he's probably going to end up in rookie drafts as a third or a early third, late second round pick. Would you say?
Kenny Pickett.
Yeah.
In Superflex?
Yeah.
I think he's probably going to be an early second.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I would say because Herbert, I guess, was a mid-second.
Herbert, well, he
had a league where he got drafted in the early third round.
But so. I in mock, I remember because that was one of the first years that we were really doing Dynasty, and I was watching a lot of mock drafts.
Yeah.
Herbert would go late first. He was 110 or 111, 12 teams.
Why did he fall to the third round in this league?
Because I don't know.
Anyway, so yeah, I could see Pickett, being in that conversation, and I think he still has Mac Jones. I love Mac Jones as a real NFL quarterback, but I do not love him for fantasy, and I said that last year. Love him in real life, hate him in fantasy, and I didn't draft him in any leagues because of that. Because I don't know how much.
You got him in one now.
What'd you say? Oh, I know I do. Now. Yeah, I have him in one now. Just doing that orphan team that has Mac Jones, so I got Mac Jones. I'm gonna keep the
Mac attack.
I'm gonna keep.
Yeah, you should keep him so you can root for him as your QB too.
That's what I'm saying. But guys like Mac Jones, ends up like Kirk Cousins, where at the height of their fantasy production, unless your name is Tom Brady, your height, the height of your fantasy production is going to be wrapped in maybe QB7 if you can't add rushing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of the situation. Now, where I think Kenny Pickett can add 200-300 yards rushing. So with that being said, if he ends up a good passing quarterback in the NFL, that could take him up. But we got to move on. Which guy do you want to talk about next? We'll talk about Howell.
We can talk about Howell.
Okay. So Sam Howell is my number 4. Sam Howell is Rick's number 2. And this guy actually, I want to say, I don't want to speak for Rick, but this guy low-key reminds me of Josh Allen. Slightly.
Okay.
So, the shades of slower Russell Wilson, PFF comparison. So this guy does some things a little bit like he has one of the stronger arms in the class. He's very accurate. He has some good mobility, so he can get out of the pocket. He's not as big as Josh Allen. So Josh Allen, what did you say, 6'6", what, 2?
Josh Allen is 6'5", 2 something, yeah.
So yeah, and Sam Howell is 6'2", 220. When I watched him on film, he reminded me of Josh Allen in terms of rushing style because, and this might get Sam Howell crushed, but he runs through people. He doesn't run away from people, or he's not gonna get around.
I mean, he's built. He's 6'1", so he's not tall, but he's at least built.
Yeah.
Pretty well. He's 220.
So he has really good arm talent, and he's most likely going to make plays with his arm down the field. If you want to compare him to a passing quarterback in the NFL, I don't know if this is a bad comp, but I would say Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, that's what my comp was before this upcoming season was.
But I would say he's a better rusher than Baker Mayfield is. So
yeah.
What did I say? I have him 4.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it mid show.
Oh, don't change it. Don't change it.
He's like, don't change.
Stick with your guns, bro.
I'm putting Sam Howell 3. No, it wasn't you that changed my mind. It was me. It was me, guy. Don't worry about it. So yeah, I'm gonna put Sam Howell 3, and Rick has him 2. So I think that's a bona fide number 2 guy. But he does a lot of things really well. But this year it was weird because like last year I think was it Howell or Matt Carroll that everyone was like, this guy's going to be next year's number 1 quarterback.
It was both, but Howell going into the year is supposed to be like a top 5 pick.
And so when you look at his PFF grades, 92.3 in 2020, but he had a 68% completion percentage, 3,550 yards, 30 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. The year prior, he had 38 touchdowns, 3,600 yards, but a lower completion percentage. This year, he had about the same completion percentage as he had in 2019. Only threw 24 touchdowns, had 9 picks and 3,000 yards. So he took a sizable hit. He had the same grade PFF-wise, just 1 point lower than he did in 2020, but he was supposed to be the number 1 overall pick at the quarterback position, take a sizable year 3 leap, and become a number 1, overall pick at the quarterback position. And now we're talking about him maybe going off the board as the 3rd or 4th quarterback.
Yeah.
So like to me, there was something that hit Sam Howell, but I think if you're trying to find a quarterback with the best arm in the class, I would say it's probably Sam Howell. But for fantasy purposes, it depends on what kind of role he ends up playing and what team he lands on to me. Because if he just ends up like standing in the pocket like Baker Mayfield, we kind of know what Baker Mayfield is for fantasy, and it's not very great. So like that might be a fantasy ceiling for him. But if he does end up rushing and adds that aspect to his game, then that could change things for Sam Howell a little bit to the point where he could end up being that, top level quarterback for fantasy football and be worth the rookie pick. This year he had 828 rushing yards. That's something different that he hasn't added to his game before. Because the years prior he had 35 and 146. So the question is, where did the 828 yards come from, and why did that change? Why did that become a thing for him? And I think that's the question, because if he goes back to what he used to do and does that in the pro game, he's Baker Mayfield, right? Fantasy-wise. I think that's his fantasy ceiling. But if he ends up rushing more, then his ceiling's a lot higher than fantasy football Baker Mayfield.
Right.
So that's, I kind of have him 3 because of that.
That's fair. And I only have him 2 ahead of Pickett, I think, just because even though we talked about Pickett could rush in the NFL, I think Howell is more likely to, just based on what we've seen in college. And the rushing floor will elevate him. But again, a lot of these guys, I think Willis will probably be my QB1 no matter what. Not probably, he will be.
Yep.
But from 2 to 5 are pretty interchangeable depending on landing spots and draft capital, the combination of those 2. So Howell's a guy who could end up being 5th. He could also stay at 2nd for me. I just like the player a lot. I think as a prospect, he was really good immediately. As a 19-year-old, he threw 38 touch. He basically, as a 19-year-old, had a better season or just as good as Kenny Pickett did as a 23-year-old. So
efficiency-wise, not great, but
no, efficiency-wise, no, but because of 61% completion percentage, but he threw 3,600 yards, 38 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. I mean, as a true freshman, that's ridiculous. That's like Trevor Lawrence.
Too bad he picked a crap school.
Well, so he had a lot more talent than around him too. And then the year after that, lost a couple guys, but was still, he became way more efficient. 68% completion percentage, 30 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. That's really, really good for a sophomore. And the expectation was this year was going to be his Heisman year. And if that were to happen, first overall pick, 100%. And it went the complete opposite way. 62%
he basically repeated
percentage.
The previous season and got slightly worse.
Yeah, and he basically repeated his freshman year, but was worse in terms of touchdowns and interception ratio, was way worse. but his rushing made up for it a little bit in some ways. So Howell, though, we've seen him what he can do. I think he's a really intriguing guy. I would like to see him landing in a good spot. He had, I think, Dewami Brown, another receiver who's was like a 6th round pick that got drafted. He had Javonte Williams and Michael Carter in his backfield.
Yep.
And all those guys left, and this was the result.
Left them.
So, is he good enough to elevate a bad team? Doesn't seem like it.
Yeah.
But if you put the talent around him, I think, and you put him in a good landing spot, we could see some good things. There's been rumors about him to the Steelers. I would be very intrigued by that. Maybe he's very
much like Big Ben.
There's possibilities though of him going in the 2nd round, and if that's the case, who knows what he does. So
yeah, I think that is also one of the situations as to why I had Sam Howell like 4th too for my fantasy football rankings, because if this guy ends up going in the 2nd round, that kind of a pick for a quarterback usually means they don't necessarily believe that they want to build around you. Like if you go in year 1 or they start you and they, you end up being really good. Davis Mills is a good example of that.
Jalen Hurts
is an example of that as well. And so it's like, but they are easily able to be like, okay, then pivot away from you if they need to.
Yes.
Be. And so
you get a way shorter leash.
So it's like for Howell, I've seen a lot of mock drafts put him with the Lions. Sitting behind Jared Goff, possibly for a little while. But he also, I want to note, because we got to move on, that Howell also seems to me like a project a little bit too.
A little bit. I think it would benefit him a lot to sit a year as well.
Yeah. Now, a massive project quarterback we're going to talk about next. Me and Rick have the same guy at 4, Desmond Ritter. I liked Ritter. PFF has him as the 3rd ranked quarterback in the class. He had a really good year, but he is definitely, he's like, we talked about Willis being a project. I think Ritter is a big project. Like,
did they make the national championship, or did they lose in the
Cincinnati?
Yeah,
they did not make the national championship.
Yeah, they lost to Bama. That's right.
Yeah. And so Desmond Ritter has some good things. He's a quick processor. He's a quick passer, so he gets the ball out fast. He's small. He's kind of small as a quarterback. He didn't have great success against strong defenses in the last 2 years of his college career. He did end up making it to the National College playoffs, which is great. And he does some things really well. He is another one of those all-around quarterbacks that does a lot of things good, but nothing really, really great. He is a good pocket passer, which is not something that you can say about a lot of the quarterbacks in this class.
No.
But he does. I want to look it up because I want to make sure that I'm saying this right. These quarterbacks, when you get this late, start meshing together in my brain. He does provide a decent rushing floor. So he had 583 rushing yards in 18, 650 in 19, 592 in 2020, and then this year he had the least with 332. So he's a quarterback that likes to rush. He's a good pocket passer. I think he has some really good traits to him that could turn him into a really good quarterback, but he also seems like a player that really needs some work in order to become an NFL starter. Like, I don't think he's ready yet. I don't think he is as much of a project as I don't know. I'm trying to figure out, like, do I feel like he is as much a project as Malik Willis or Trey Lance? Or is he somebody that can come in right away and have success? I think his rushing puts him at 4 for me, because if he rushes like he did in college, he could have 400 or 500 rushing yards a season as a starter. Yes. And that adds 50 fantasy points to your total. And that could be the difference between you finishing as, QB 15 and QB 10. So for him, there is upside in that category. I have him 4, and I did have him 3, but I swapped him with Howell. I have him 4 because I don't know where he's going to get drafted, 1, and 2, I think he's one of those guys that could end up falling into the second round deep and never play as a starter in the NFL. It could really go either way. But I've also seen him in mock drafts get drafted in the first round and get drafted by the Seattle Seahawks.
Which would be a complete 180.
Yeah, it would be a complete 180. That would be a great situation. And I was actually going to say, funny situation for the Seahawks, getting mock draft a lot by people to the Seattle Seahawks, is that when I looked at his profile, I'm not saying he is Russ. I'm saying he looks like him. He rushes.
Does a little bit.
Pocket presence. He doesn't have the accuracy that Russ had coming out, or the arm strength, but he kind of reminds me a little bit of that, where he's a good pocket passing quarterback, but he has mobility. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. It could go either way. He could end up in a really good landing spot, first round drafted quarterback, maybe go to Seattle Seahawks, or he could be a late second round pick and no one talks about him. So. Right.
I mean, I actually think he is kind of NFL ready.
Yeah.
I mean, he's in a weird spot because like he could also probably benefit to sit, but I don't think it's the same as Howell or Willis.
Yeah.
Because of his, if you look at what he's good at and his strengths, like you were saying, pocket presence, mobility. Apparently he's a good leader, commands the field, blah blah blah.
Yeah, as I think about it, I'm like, he's definitely not a project. Like he doesn't seem like a project in my mind anymore.
He has good mechanics, good footwork
compared to everyone else in this class, I'll say.
Yeah, I mean this is from a scouting report from Dan Jeremiah. Machine like mechanics, quote unquote, which is good. But you look at the negatives where he has the weaknesses. Deep balls have a tendency to come up short.
Yeah.
What I really don't like, and this is something I've seen watching him on film too, is slower operation time, which led to 26 career batted passes in the NFL. If you have a slow, it's not just the release. And operation time is the whole motion of throwing the football.
Yeah.
If that is slow at the NFL level, he's going to get eaten up by good defenses.
Right. He's got
batting down passes. Yeah, he's got to clean that up a little bit. But like a lot of this stuff is like pretty NFL ready for the most part. But I have him at 4-2 just because I think the speed element. I think you can. I keep going back and forth between him and Carroll as a better actual real NFL prospect. But for fantasy purposes, I definitely have him ahead of Carroll just because of his rushing ability. And landing spot is going to be huge with Ritter and all these guys.
Yeah. Let's look at the last guy that we have, number 5. And the last quarterback is Matt Carroll. Now, this was another one of those quarterbacks that was supposed to be highly drafted coming in.
Yep.
And he had a bad year. Generally speaking.
Yeah, he was okay.
He was all right.
It just wasn't to expectation.
Took a step back. It was another one of those. Who's the other guy that was supposed to get drafted wicked high, and then he ended up a backup and he transferred?
Spencer
Rattler.
Right.
That kid's got a rocket. Yeah. I thought we were going to be talking about him last year when I was talking about Mac Jones. Nope. Anyway, Matt Carroll. Yeah, so he kind of took a little bit of a step back from his previous year. In terms of the PFF grade, threw 29 touchdowns, 13 interceptions in 2020, only threw 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in 2021. So, he took a little bit of a step back, but he still has, I think, some things that are usable in the pro game, obviously. He's a little bit mobile. He's good accuracy, good arm strength, not great in the pocket. He's kind of small. Everything he throws is like a laser, if that makes sense. He doesn't have a lot of touch, a lot of ability with touch passes and stuff like that, and that's an area where he can improve. So I kind of look at him as a guy like there's a chance that he could end up as like a late second round pick as well, and there's not a great shot that he gets drafted at that point. But then some, like I said, some mock drafts have him going top 20, and it's like where is he going to end up? So fantasy wise, I think Carroll provides some good things. But I think there's the variable of which I say Carroll. Is it Coral?
I've heard Carroll, but it looks like Coral.
But so he does provide rushing. He provides all of that. But the question is, do NFL teams really believe that he can be a number one, like a quarterback in the NFL? Do they believe he can be a franchise guy for them? Because if they don't, he's going to go in the second round. If they do, he'll go in the first round, and he'll end up being a guy that a team is investing in for the long term. And so I feel like there's a chance that he could do that. And if he does end up an NFL starter, I like the ability, his rushing ability. I like the aspects of his game that he provides, and he could be a decent quarterback. But I think this is one of the guys, when I watched him on tape and I saw him, he just seemed like the least prepared, the least ready, and the least exciting out of all of the quarterbacks here. And to me, I feel like he could end up like a second round pick and just be nothing. And if that does happen, then Matt Carroll is not really worth your fantasy team at this point. Like, it's worth it in a super flex. Like, draft him in the third, fourth round and hope something happens. But like, you don't always get lucky with Davis Mills. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And, the negatives you hear from him too are kind of like, ugh. Yeah. You're right. He's a little not exactly exciting. He doesn't have, I don't think, the greatest arm.
Yeah.
He also apparently played in a very offensive-friendly system, quarterback-friendly scheme. So those are some negatives.
Right.
There's also rumors about his maturity, which is never good.
Oh, especially for a quarterback.
Yeah. But some of his positives, though, are also really good. Like, he's apparently a very quick processor and a very good decision maker. He doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. I think he had 14 in 2020, but this past year in 13 games only had 5 interceptions. Right. So he was very good with the ball, which you don't get a lot from young prospects. He's got a really quick release, and those are really nice, like, tight spiral. Patriots love that. That was one of their favorite things about Jimmy coming out of college.
Tight spirals.
Well, just like those quick releases, like the Tony Romos, the Jimmy Garoppolos, like that have that they just come right out.
Yeah.
The ball comes right out. Kind of the opposite of Desmond Ritter. Not that Riddler has a slow release. His is more of a motion thing. But
did you just call him Riddler?
I did, Ritter.
Desmond Riddler. Can we call him that? Is that his new nickname?
Well, I just saw the new Batman movie, so
there you
go. So yeah, but anyway, Carroll, I think, or is it Carroll? I feel like I don't know. Or I'm just gonna call him Carroll for now until someone corrects me. I think he's very similar, and like you said, he could be a late second round pick, and if that happens, he's in the wasteland. But there's also rumors that he's a first round pick too, and he's the second or third quarterback off the board after Willis and potentially Pickett. So who the hell knows?
I definitely think, like, with Ritter and Carroll, like, I watched Ritter on film and I was like excited. I was like, oh, I like this guy. And Carroll, I watched on film and I was like, yeah, he's good. But I'm like, both of them are like, they're in the same conversation. I hate to say this, but to me, they like watching them. They're kind of in the same conversation to me as like Davis Mills and Kellen Mond last year, if they were in last year's draft.
Exactly.
And like, that sounds horrible, but this is not a great quarterback class. And like, I think, the mock drafters are trying very, very, very freaking hard to get some quarterbacks in the first round, like really hard. But it's just, to me, I don't know how many quarterbacks are actually going to go. I would not be surprised if it only ends up being 2 in the first round.
Yes.
I would not be surprised at all. And if that's the case, you're going to end up with a lot of these quarterbacks falling down. Now, this could be a good thing for rookie drafts too, because you might end up with guys. Say Willis and Pickett get picked in the first round, then Howell, Ritter, and Carroll end up falling to the second, right? You're gonna get some. You're gonna get some decent quarterbacks on the cheap in the second round of rookie drafts. Some of these guys might end up like a Davis Mills and fall to the third round just because they're second round picks. And so it's like, I look at this going, yeah, you know what? It could be a good thing for that, but it also means that that player either is going to sit behind somebody or most like I would not be surprised in the slightest if Pittsburgh ends up going with a quarterback in the second round instead of the first.
Yeah, I think Atlanta too was a team that you could see that.
Yep.
After they signed Marcus Mariota.
It should be interesting, but yeah. Any more thoughts on these guys?
No, I think that's about it.
Okay, there you go. Top 5 rookie quarterbacks for the 2022 fantasy football season. We're going to update these, I think, post-draft, and we might even do some final rankings pre-draft, so we'll see what happens. But mine are Malik Willis, Pickett, Howell, Ritter, Carroll, in that order. Rick, what do you got?
I don't have the notes up. Oh, my gosh.
All right,
Willis,
anyway,
Howell,
see you later,
Pickett,
guys.
Ritter, Carroll.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.